Okay. It is Wednesday, June 17th.
Yes,
I
sir.
am broadcasting today from Atlanta, Georgia. It is a glorious day after a lot of rain. I was just with Georgia Power downtown looking at the new street lights, intelligent street lights that they're deploying across the city, 1,000 of them or so. All kinds of interesting discussions. I took two Waymo rides yesterday and today from the airport here and inside downtown. There are probably 1,000 Waymos running around. They talk to the street lights, the utilities collaborating with Google. It's amazing what's happening, and the future is now. So anyway, Johnny, I don't know if you have your guitar with you, but before
I
we get
do.
started, let's have some music.
Sure. Just about a year ago, I set out on the road, seeking my fame and fortune, looking for a pot of gold. Things got rough and things got tough. I guess you know the song. And oh Lord, I'm stuck in Lodi
Ooh, I
again.
like that. I like that. Thank you. Thank
I'll
you.
let Credence
Well,
Clearwater.
as I was saying, Johnny, lots going on in the world, and obviously the macro economics continue. Let's not forget that SpaceX went public. Elon Musk is the first trillionaire ever in the planet. Fascinating what he's creating in an ecosystem around Texas with Starbase that launches all the rockets in near Brownsville, south of the border of Texas and Mexico. And really, the whole battle between NVIDIA and Broadcom and AMD and the new chips. And there have been a ton of companies that have released new information about their demand, their business. Dell, Hewlett Packard, the demand for chips, servers for the data center is through the roof. Dell stock is up 100% over the last 6 months. Hewlett Packard stock is 150% over the last 6 months. I mean, this AI build out is happening. I don't know where the end is in sight, what's going to happen here, but I tell you, the all the companies that I've talked to lately, the last week or so, about seven of them, they're all using AI one way or another to accelerate their customer experience, how they talk to potential customers, how they service existing customers. A lot of that is going on, Johnny. What say you?
Well, I think, I've had discussions about what's going on, and I like to approach it from two ways. And I like to use our experience here in Austin. And I think what we're missing here is shared prosperity. It's something that the Ford Motor Company started when they made the Model T. And the question is, how do you get money to your employees and allowing them to live a good life? And what we did in Austin, we don't allow unions in the great state of Texas. So we created something called shared prosperity. There was a professor out at Stanford who created something called stock options because Apple computer could not compete with Hewlett Packard on salary. So Apple would say, we'll pay you $20,000 a year and give you, two million in worthless stock options. Of course, when they went public, everything, it had so many people to receive wealth. Here in Austin, same thing with Dell. When Dell went public, he created 980 millionaires. That's 30 million in the bank. And so the idea of shared prosperity, where the owners, the employees themselves would also own, Andreas, a part of the company.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Whole Foods was done that way, and all of
Mm-hmm.
the and we because we did not have unions, so you had to make sure that the employees were taken care of in another kind of way. I don't see that now, Andreas.
Well, SpaceX just went public, and actually
Yeah,
a few of the senior managers are
yeah, but
billionaires.
I see no employees though. See, I see a
Oh
firing.
yeah. All the employees
So
of
when you're
Space.
firing people, there's no shared prosperity. So that's the first thing I react to as
Yeah,
a
yeah.
scholar. How do we measure and look at all of that for the future?
No,
On the
but
other side, Andreas, you're exactly right. Uh,
there's stock market avenue and up in the
yeah, I mean the stock
utilities.
market doesn't pay attention to politics or anything. Really, it just goes what a company doing. Now on the other side, as you say it, the technology is booming. But we got to
Hmm.
remember where the technology came from. As Llewellyn
Hmm.
King, my prophet, said last year, if we lose
Hmm.
our research universities, where will it come from? People say, what about blockchain? Well, that came from the research on DNA from biology. How you store the information in blockchain was
Hmm.
based on the DNA of human beings. That is, human beings, of course, can do everything that we're trying to do with AI. Nobody has done it better. But
Hmm.
on the other hand, we must replace them. So I agree with you. I agree that the technology is booming and the companies are booming. And the stock market is being carried by, 5 or 6 companies. And Andreas, just as sure as we sit here, we want to hope and pray that it's not a bubble in all of the investment in AI. As you know better than me, there's a riot against a lot of the data centers that's being, put in communities. And I want to get your reaction to this, Andreas. The government of the great state of Texas passed a bill that said the
Hmm.
following: the price for electricity for the data centers will not be carried by the customers, cannot be carried by the customers. In other
Yeah,
words,
not subsidized by the
you
retail
cannot
customers.
cannot be subsidized. So you cannot pass the price of the data centers on to the customers.
Hmm.
And
I
that
agree.
means that every data center has to have its own generation for electricity, independent of ERCOT.
Mm,
So I
no.
think that I think the technology is going, and I'll say this last thing. It's only happening though in certain segments of the country. And we know this from studying different countries. That is, there's a technology center, a geography in China. There's one in Africa. There's one in England, where technology tends to cluster, and the companies themselves tend to cluster, right? So I think that's what's going on. And behind my mind is what's happening to the universities. For example, I think Texas A&M, based on research, is probably the best university in the state of Texas, based on how much money they bring in for research. I think that UT Austin is right behind them based on that. I think that Texas Tech is trying to come up, but I also think that there are so many professors who are just mad as hell who bring in the money. So I worry about that in the back of my mind. And if you look at job generation, is not bad, Andreas. Job generation is not
Yeah,
bad.
yeah. But let's not forget one quick point before I go to Llewellyn. We have talked over and over that while science and technology is critical for the innovation cycles and the creation of entrepreneurship and companies, remember that you, as an engineer, as a physicist or a chemist, you are not top leading edge when it comes to communications, psychology, political skills. So you still find in the leadership roles of all these companies, finance people,
Well,
lawyers,
well, I agree. It has to be strategy.
philosophy people, political science people.
The
So they
liberal
can
arts,
talk. They can talk.
yes, the liberal arts would come back strong because remember
Yeah,
that computer science came from philosophy when you
yeah.
trace it, right? So
Hmm.
in the business world, we would say that strategy now
Hmm.
and data analysis is the most important skill you can have. But
Hmm.
strategy is going to come. The data analysis is going to come from economic psychology and sociology statistics
Hmm.
about human beings. Because remember, the stock market is nothing but a theory about what human beings do. It's very
That's right.
sociological, right? When you get
That's
to
right.
writing the algorithms.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a place, but more importantly, there are companies that we haven't thought about yet that will
Hmm.
be produced. That's what I say.
Hmm.
That's what has kept America going.
I agree. I agree. Llewellyn, what say you?
Well, I think it's a very critical time because we have an agreement to agree with Iran, which is rather flimsy. It takes us back to the status quo ante. The Strait of Hormuz will be open, but it was open before this war and all of its death and destruction took place. So the net advance is very hard to measure, despite certain claims about absolute victory, etc. And a lot depends on how smoothly uh, the flow of oil into the world goes. The world cannot go on being starved of oil without it having a serious economic impact. As I recall, during 1974, 23 heads of state lost their jobs because of inflation as a result of the Arab oil embargo of the winter of 73. We're in a strange situation where a very small part of the economy is dominating it, and that is what I like to call the electromagnetic economy. We call it high tech, and certainly the high tech companies are riding very high. These IPOs have been extraordinary. Elon Musk especially so. But as we said on this program last week, Johnny and I agreed that there's no evidence that these huge valuations of these companies will be justified. There's nothing in their business plans that suggests they can recover anything like the kind of money that they're taking in with sales. So that's precarious. The global situation is precarious. Our situation as a nation in the world is more precarious than it has been in a long time. And nonetheless, as you say, Andres, there is a huge surge forward in technology. I would like to mention it's not just things associated with computers. It includes materials, usages, applications down the line. We don't know where it's going to shake out. It could be a huge surge in productivity, or it could be a huge surge in unemployment. When you're riding in that Waymo, somebody's not driving your Uber or driving your taxi. It is a subtraction of a whole category of jobs. If we have 3 million truck drivers, and in due course they all become some version of a Waymo, that's a lot of unemployed people of skill, but limited skill. It's not a skill that immediately you can apply to a circuit board, for example. And so we stand there on this strange situation where we're either about to leap forward and the whole human race is going to be better off, or we're going to slide back and we're going to have a repeat of the 1930s. Being rather a Cassandra myself, I'm inclined to think it's the 1930s that are hovering on the horizon, not the 1950s. So there we are. It's much depends on whether Trump can actually sell this flimsy peace arrangement he has, whether he can sell it to his own party, whether he can sell it to Israel, which might undermine it and has the capacity to do that in various ways. Today, he was finally obliged to put out some of the information, to put out actually the wording, and it's pretty flimsy, as I said. It's not a conclusive document in any sense at all. It goes back to promises that were made in the original peace treaty torn up by Trump, or to the situation and status quo ante before the war. No advance seems to have been made in our dealings. He talks, the White House today put out a statement talking about dust. Enriched uranium is described as uranium dust. It's almost certainly uranium hexafluoride at the moment. It's probably in its gaseous state. The stages of uranium are uranium ore, and it's enriched, and you get yellow cake, which is somewhat granular, and uranium hexafluoride, which is UF6, which is what you have to have it in actually to enrich it. And that's what you put in the centrifuges. And so now we have a strange new substance on the earth called uranium dust, which the White House itself, not just did Trump mention uranium dust, nuclear dust, I think he calls it. But now today, the White House has put out a statement talking about nuclear dust, which is an interesting piece of language. So we're where we were last week. Hopeful. The stock market is going up. There's a lot of speculative money But also there's a certain indication that there is so much investment money around that it has lost sense. It is not looking at its own old fundamentals, which are price earnings, basically. It's now in a world of its own of hopefulness. When the stock market, any stock market gets hopeful, it's usually before it trips itself up.
So I love one of the things that I love about our program is that you always get the two sides of a coin. And before I introduce our guest, who's a great friend and an incredible human being, I'll tell you in a few seconds about him. I just remind you that the so-called short-term success of SpaceX is the fact that SpaceX is 24 years old as a company. It was founded in 2002. And it took a while, a long time, to learn how to make rockets come back down backwards and land. So it didn't happen overnight. A lot of sleepless nights over 24 years to get to where they are. And actually, a lot of the success stories on Wall Street are like that. NVIDIA. Everybody talks about NVIDIA today. 3 years ago, nobody knew who they were. NVIDIA has been around for 15 years. So on and so on and so on. So
They
let
were
me let me
on a
let me
television program 4 years ago, but don't worry about that.
let me tell you real quick about our guest. Dr. Jorge Vanegas is a professor at Texas A&M University at the moment. Before taking down a slower role, he was the dean of the College of Architecture, director of the Institute for Sustainable Communities. Um, Jorge, as I can call him as a friend, is an internationally recognized academic leader, architect, engineer, and sustainability expert with more than 3 decades of experience in infrastructure, construction, smart community, and sustainable development. Curious to see what he thinks about colonizing Mars and the moon. He currently serves as professor at Texas A&M University and director of the Institute of Sustainable Communities, following a distinguished tenure as the dean. He holds bachelor's degrees in architecture from Universidad de los Andes in Colombia, and both a Master of Science and a Ph.D. degrees in construction engineering and management from Stanford University, not an easy place to get accepted. Prior to Texas A&M, as a professor, he was faculty and leadership positions at Purdue University, another great school, and the Georgia Institute of Technology, another great school. Jorge is widely recognized for his work in resilient infrastructure, smart and sustainable communities, digital transformation of the built environment, and innovation-driven economic development. Throughout his career, he has led major multidisciplinary research, education, and public-private partnership initiatives focused on advancing the future infrastructure and community resilience. Jorge, it is a pleasure to welcome you.
Wow, Andres, I hope you don't see how red my face is with that introduction. But anyway, I have been following this program a lot, and I hope that I can contribute from my perspective.
Mhm.
I asked you what would I talk about because I do have a wide range.
Mhm.
But listening at the beginning of most of your podcasts,
Mhm.
you're already at the core of what I do.
Mhm.
All right. We all talk about ecosystems. We all
Mhm.
talk about things that are technical, things that are social. It's a complete reality of what humanity is.
Mhm.
I have chosen to not take sides on anything, but at the same time, I have chosen to take sides on everything, which seems like a contradiction, but it's what allows me to see the world in a very different way. And I will illustrate it with a couple of very specific examples.
Mhm.
So, the problem that I see with all the people that I have had, and I have taught actually thousands of students and
Mhm.
colleagues, I have had hundreds of colleagues, and through my external involvement with organizations in civil engineering, in construction engineering, in several that are really known, the Construction Users Roundtable, the Business Roundtable, all that. I'm a child of the Business Roundtable in the late 70s, if you remember what that
Mhm.
was.
Mhm.
Anyway, to make a long story short, there are a couple of things that I believe that drive my curiosity and imagination. And I would say that's my starting point. I have been teaching the same course, even when I was dean and all kinds of roles. I have been teaching the same course for almost 20 years at Texas A&M. It's a course that defies normal curriculum because of its complexity and everything that does. So let me tell you, for me, it's a kind of inside look into the generation that we're getting through. And that is one of my concerns. And at the same time, the opportunities we have when you talk about the things that you're talking in the way that you're talking. I don't see many kids today curious. I even believe that their imagination has been completely replaced by whatever they see on this little thing, okay?
Mhm.
Or any other game or TikTok or anything. So we are seeing an erosion from what I would call the fundamental engines of possibility. You cannot go to places that you have never been unless you're curious. And if
Mhm.
you find obstacles, have the imagination on how to overcome them or go through them, all
Mhm.
kinds of things. But then the real problem begins when, and I'm mixing what I'm teaching with how I apply it to my reality outside teaching, the
Mhm.
complement. So you start looking at, okay, so suppose that we do have that. So I'm going to paint an image in your minds and you will see it perfectly.
Mhm.
You know, a sun is
Mhm.
full of, you know, energy coming in and energy going out. Well, for me, the fuel of a fire is curiosity and imagination. But when you light that fire, what happens in the campfire? It's warm when you're close, and what happens? Very light when you're close, the light is there. But when you move away, it kind of dissipates.
Mhm.
So the question is, how do we capture that energy? And you know what the source of creativity is in our world today, according to myself?
Mhm.
There are only five things that I have found that drive everything that we do. Number
Mhm.
one, is there a question that has not been answered? Well, that goes directly to the research that we do, applied, fundamental, you want to call it. But the second thing is, okay, do we have problems? Absolutely, all kinds of problems. So that's a second driver, trying to
Mhm.
find solutions to problems. Then
Mhm.
you have the third one, which is also a different nature animal completely. And that one is, do we have needs of any sort?
Mhm.
Absolutely. Now, none of them have one answer, and the answer is all over. So the
Mhm.
questions, problems, and needs are what I call what is pushing us
Mhm.
to do what we're doing in technology, what we're doing in health, what we're doing in prosperity, in
Mhm.
financing, in whatever. There are
Mhm.
problems to solve, there are questions to answer, and there are
Mhm.
needs to satisfy. But then
Mhm.
you look at it from the opposite end. And I would say that the driver there is a pull, which is as powerful as a push. The
Mhm.
pull is, have you ever heard the word opportunity,
Mhm.
possibility? And
Mhm.
what do we do with those? We try to realize it. That's what entrepreneurship is all about. That's what everything I've heard in this program is all about.
Mhm.
We have opportunities. That's why the project that you lead is where
Mhm.
it is. And that possibility, opportunity to realize is a tremendous pool. And that is what has separated the
Mhm.
people that are making it out there and those that don't. So the
Mhm.
last thing, the five, I said there was only five.
Mhm.
The last thing is, do you ever have a dream? Do you ever have an aspiration? Do you ever have a
Mhm.
fantasy?
Mhm.
Well, that's another big pool. An entrepreneur that wakes up thinking, I have a new business model and I want to do this is driven by that aspiration. So that's my starting point. But then the question is really,
Mhm.
how do you transfer those push pull things into a reality? So
Mhm.
there are five modes of thinking, and you can correct me at any time because I constantly calibrate this model.
Mhm.
Number one, have you ever heard about creative thinking?
Mhm.
Creativity is not just for artists. Creativity comes from a mother in an underserved population that
Mhm.
makes miracles to
Mhm.
feed her children.
Right.
Creativity is part of what makes us human. And that creativity on its own is fine. But it's more powerful when you take creativity to the second type of thinking, which is innovative thinking. And you are all extremely familiar because that's the world in which you live. But creativity and innovation is not enough if you don't have the third one. And that's where I learned at Stanford. Design thinking, which brings that humanity into this, brings the empathy. Whatever technology you're doing is going to be used by humans. So the whole focus of human-centered design is tremendously important. So as I build that thing to you, I have a ball of fire constantly fueled by those five things. The base of the triangle is creative thinking and innovative thinking and design thinking. But now let's capture that fire just like an oven to make a pizza. Put another little dot on the top, and then you connect them. And what kind of figure do you have? You have a triangular pyramid. That top is entrepreneurial thinking, which is completely different to creative design and all of that. They all complement each other. They all supplement each other, and they all work together towards something bigger. And I added several years ago another type of thinking, which you all are very familiar, and that is digital thinking. If we don't wrap what we're doing today in some level of digital, whatever that may mean, that's it. But that's just the middle. The pièce de résistance at the end is nothing will work if we do not also apply, for me, what makes everything stable structurally. And that is critical thinking. And that is why AI can be a problem when it starts replacing or trying to replace, again, that inherent human characteristic of critical thinking. And the last one, I think it's a little bit elusive because it actually goes against many people that want to do. Sometimes I heard that a PhD is nothing more than trying to find more and more about less and less because you need to, get the topic together less and less and less until you know everything about nothing. And that's kind of what I'm trying to avoid. So the last piece, which is what drives everything I do, is the whole concept of connectivity, the whole concept that nothing is isolated from anything else, and that is systems thinking. So when you look at that, you have a choice. Do we put this whole thinking mode, integration and coordination towards what we already have? Or do we aim it to what we don't have yet, that we don't even know we have or want or whatever? So for me, it's that living dynamic of what makes an ecosystem work. So at the essence of a definition, if you look at what an ecosystem is, first of all, two things collide. The living things and the physical things. Okay. Right. And that's the world which I am, at the collision and intersection of people and everything else that surrounds people, from their home to their infrastructure to everything. So for me, facilities and infrastructure has been at the core of what I do, at least technically and formally through my education. So yeah, that's kind of the opening to what I do.
Awesome. John Butler, jump in.
Professor, we're in a graduate seminar. I love it. Let me just comment first of all on imagination. When you're a professor, we want our students to question everything, what we're used to. We want them to question everything. And it's about imagination. And I used to not envy the physical sciences, but one thing I know, it was all imagination. Einstein never walked through the universe. What he said was, he looked at something on Earth, it fell down. He looked at something, he said, maybe energy is equal to mass. But we don't know that. And then we go test that, okay? That is, he didn't have the opportunity to walk through the universe to see how it operated. He created theories to see how it operated. Everything is imagination. Can you imagine a person who looked at a bee and said, hey, why are those wings flapping like that? That's where airplanes came from. The helicopter, that's in nature, right? So what you're saying is that if you can imagine that everybody will have a car in America, that's forward. Can you imagine that everybody would have a computer in America? That's Gates. So when you take away the imagination, in our cases, and Professor, I'm sure you read my stuff on ecosystems. When you look at when you take away the imagination, there is nothing. And I can tell you this: America developed like it is scientifically because for the Americans who were here, our immigrants have been so imaginative in business enterprises. Remember that Silicon Valley that we celebrated forever and ever was, 60% of the CEOs were Chinese Indians. Okay, if this was New York in 1870s, where the entrepreneurs were from England, or they were from France, or they were from Italy, right? So without imagination, there's nothing. We have to be able to imagine that you can fly. You have to be able to imagine that we can communicate. So that's the first thing I want to. There's a great book called The Sociological Imagination. It takes in all of these things that you're talking about, but you have to have an imagination. And of course, nobody imagines stuff better than professors because we have to imagine to test the theories, right, that we create. The other thing is the connectivity. Professor, I don't know if you know, but the latest great articles say that the mathematical modeling, because of the big data, and the distinction between the physical sciences and the social sciences must be dropped. Because the mathematical modeling is all the same now. If you look at what I mentioned here before, Pentler's great book on social physics, my MIT buddy who wrote a great book on social physics. Not only is there connectivity, but we can measure the connectivity. So what does this have to do with business enterprises? What you're saying is everything has an ecosystem. We know that cells has an ecosystem. We know about the atom moving around, right? We also know that the vagus nerve and the brain nerve look just like the universe. What does that mean for the scientist that's doing research? And I maintain that all of the great discoveries in the future will come out of biology before they came out of philosophy, and that was computer science. But I think the research on biological sciences, on the cells, on how cells operate, billions and billions of dollars have been spent on the aging process in Silicon Valley. And we're just beginning to look at all of these things. A lot of this goes back to the ancients. I mean, the Egyptians believed that the brain was in the heart. Nobody ever died of a broken brain. They died of a broken heart. So I want to ask the professor this. What you just presented was a conception of a thinking environment, whether it's a university, a coffee shop, or wherever, where there are no doors, where there are no walls, where everything is related. When we built the med school at the University of Texas, it was done so that professors in the biggest health journal, it's called the Sociology of Health, and they could get data with, they could hook up and get grants with the professors. Psychology the same way, economics the same way. How do we take down the barriers that's really, really great, right, in universities now? And how do we get back to teaching critical thinking in all disciplines, especially architecture? Look, the great buildings is nothing but imagination.
Well, funny you say that, John, because that's another one. Okay, you brought another one that I was not going to talk about, but now I have to talk about it. I think that all the differences that we really have, the polarizers that takes us in different directions, red, blue, left, right, whatever it may be, they're missing one thing, and that is that it's inevitable that in a world of connectivity in an ecosystem, every cell stands on its own. Okay? You can go down to every atom and it stands on its own. So it doesn't matter what the scale is. Okay? Everything is a silo of some sort. And you've heard a lot about breaking the silos and doing all of these things. I actually wrote a little paper in a petrochemical magazine called Let's Embrace the Silos. And after that, I actually discovered that it matches a lot of what I believe is about connecting things. So yeah, the first part was all about imagination and all of that. So how do you make that come down? Well, there's an intermediate thing before going from that imagination to something really, really tangible there. A product, a service, a process, whatever it may be that's tangible. So what's in the middle? We have to navigate through a whole world of silos. I used to drive a lot down South Texas, and you have those silos of, whatever they have. So just imagine a bunch of silos.
Mm-hmm.
Here is what I have learned in my dealings with so many different things. Number one, inside one silo, you have one movement, vertical mobility.
Mm-hmm.
And that happens in everything. You start as an assistant professor, and then you go to associate professor, then you go to full professor, then you go to distinguished professor. Everything. You start in the mail room and you end up in a C-suite. So there is a lot of vertical mobility. So I apply my architecture thing and says, okay, there's several ways in which we can facilitate that. Make stairs or create elevators. And that solves one little problem. But then comes a second one. How many silos have you ever seen that have windows? Not many. A lot of silos only look inside. It's like living in a world of mirrors. So when you want to somehow connect silos, the first easy way is, can you see out of a silo? And can you see into a silo? And that's part of the problem. And that's where the technology and all these kind of big, big things that connect people, it's all about connectivity again. So the visual connectivity allows you to start seeing a silo not as its own thing, but as part of many other things. Now, what happens when you're in an apartment and you look down and you see the window of another apartment and they're having a hell of a party? What do you want to do? You want to go over there. So then you need a second design intervention. Now, John, I'm putting my architect hats on. We design stairs and elevators. We design windows. The third intervention is we need to design doors. Go out of your silo and go to another silo and visit. We don't have that as much. And in fact, in many of our sciences or whatever, don't tell me you're hanging out with those people. All right? There's always this thing about one being more than the other. So easy. Vertical mobility and visual mobility and physical mobility inter-silo. But that's not enough either. You are a professor at UT and you move over to Texas A&M. Okay, you normally don't move down. You don't go from full professor to get an assistant professor. You move at least horizontally or up. So you need bridges connecting these silos. That's another way of mobility. And when you're in the middle of a bridge, oh, wait, there's another silo over there. So let's take a detour and maybe it's a stairway. So bridges and stairs inside the silos add an element of connectivity. And this, by the way, does translate into the technologies that we develop.
Well, Professor, I'm glad you said that. Let me just take a little bit more time because what took me out of my silo was...
Johnny, I need to get Llewellyn in.
Yeah, let me just say that with the neural networks, right? So when I looked at my physical networks and statistics, and then I started talking to the biologists in neural networks, and of course then computer science was messing around with neural network and machine learning, right? That's where it all came from. And so we started writing research grants together on neural networks and ecosystems, which we think is the same when it looked to the networking. Okay, I want to say that. So I think problem solving, I started working with people in biology, and then you could really look at the engineering. If you look at nanotechnology, I mean, they're using the same thing in biology that the engineers had used for a long time with nanotechnology. It's just much smaller. But go ahead.
Llewellyn, get in here.
Jorge, I like very much two things you said. One is the power of pulling. I've written quite a lot about the difference between, say, a government pushing a technology and a government pulling a technology. It works when a government says to a technology, get me this, get to that, take us to the moon. It works less well when they do what they're actually doing with small modular reactors at the moment, which is pushing 6 different kinds of reactor. It doesn't produce the same result as pulling. which I think is an important dynamic. I also think you can think of pulling as being leadership, pushing as being something else. The other thing is with creativity is very much driven by adversity. And the largest adversity a society can have is war. And during war, we see huge surges in creativity, whether it's drones in UK, in Ukraine, or whether it was all of the inventions that came out of the Second World War. And when we get to some satisfaction, some plateau, very little creativity happens. We all become rent takers, not entrepreneurs. But as to a question, in your work with communities, we have one tremendous need in communities at the moment. That is more housing, but the market is not responding. What is the impediment here?
Do you remember in the 70s, Operation Breakthrough? That came out of HUD, Housing and Urban Development, which opens another door to what I was going to finish. So I'm just going to say one thing to finish the other two interventions. In addition to the connectivity between them, you need a last one. And that is not everybody wants to go from one silo to another silo and let people know that they're going from one silo to another silo. So you need tunnels as well. So when you have that mesh of things, you can do that. So part of my answer to your question, Llewellyn, is the following. Operation Breakthrough was a good social experiment of some sort. And Operation Breakthrough was 1969 was when HUD launched it. You know what they said then? The housing crisis is a supply side industrial problem. So they developed all these things, and many companies like COA and other industrial giants wanted to put all that together and make the construction another manufacturing industry. Great idea. You know where it failed, Llewellyn, and why it can be done is because all the other things that are not part of the system of production itself came into place. Things that you would not even consider at this. So what's the problem with manufacturing? You have issues of scale. You have issues of, what do you call that, standardization, regulatory harmonization, and guess what? You know how many local codes did not allow for factory-built housing? So now you're introducing something that has nothing to do with the product that you're doing, but where you're going to be putting it. The inspections, the permits, how will they will doing it? Federal subsidies allowed some of these projects to be done, but they end. They were not self-replicating. So the point is that, you know, everything that is a prototype of affordable and industrialized kind of housing, they're very sufficient technically. There was no word around that. I actually visited one of the only factories that was still done. This was in the early 80s. And I was floored by the advanced concepts of that. And I said, why aren't you not in business? Well, they had closed. You know, they put up a building in LA that has the earthquake zones using these manufactured industrialized things in 22 days. Okay, so there are examples of that. So everything surrounding them is what failed. The financing structures, the regulatory harmonization, the sustained policy commitment. That's where we need to start looking, is that the fracture that we have in the country is not just at the top level. It goes down to the petty politics of the most rural town that you get, where you have maybe a family in control or whatever it is. It doesn't really matter. That's part of the problem. So what I have been looking at is kind of a way to connect with people. So I'll tell you my solution, Llewellyn. Okay? Nobody can solve this problem on their own, but together, all of them can. So I have a model that I've been trying to implement with communities, and I'm getting very, very close to do that. That has three components. You need people of all sorts. You've heard the word collaboratory, right? It's a collaboration laboratory where failure is an option and you learn from doing, and everybody's there because they want to be there and they want to be playing with other ones. If you're playing with somebody in biology and you are in hardcore material science, There's nothing that stops you from doing that. And that cross-fertilization is what leads to fantastic things. So my first element that I have been working on is how do we create collaboratories? But now with everything that you have talked in your program and everything that keeps on talking is the connectivity that you do through technology. And that has a name too. It's called a cyber infrastructure. So when you look at people connected through cyber infrastructure, and this, I've seen it described as a wormhole. I can connect with somebody right now in China or Japan or New Zealand, same moment in time. They're in a different time zone, maybe another day different or whatever it is. We have that connectivity already in our fields. But those two alone will never solve a problem.
Let
Because
me
now
pose,
comes the last,
let me pose
the last one,
a question.
the last one is the third one, is when we knew about, normal telescopes, you knew about the galaxies, right?
Yeah.
Did that change when you threw up that Webb telescope and the Hubble telescope? It opened a whole new world. And you mentioned something that I actually teach in class. I have two slides side by side. The one at the nano particle level and the one at the farthest galaxy level. And guess what? They look exactly the same. So what happens to all that empty space between particles? You could literally go anywhere and go through anything. So the three things, Llewellyn, and I'm sorry I wanted to finish that, is that when you bring together the people, provide them all that connectivity tools for sharing, archiving, and doing all the things we do, you need the observatory of applied and actionable knowledge that already exists. You don't need to do research that's fundamental on something that doesn't exist. If we just mine what we have,
I think
we
you
have
need
1,000 solutions.
I think you need incentive. Incentive can be adversity, incentive can be the pursuit of wealth. And these are things that get people curious, get them moving, get them thinking. At one time, I was involved with the Los Alamos National Laboratory, and they had a thing. It was when a man called Sig Hecker was the director, and he founded a thing we called it the Mod Squad. I was not on the staff or anything. I was just a journalist who wrote about the laboratories. And the Mod Squad was a group of PhDs, young people, and they just were supposed to sit around and think. And I was allowed to sit with them a few times. And I went back to Sega and I said, you've got to give them an assignment. We're just talking nonsense. We're not going anywhere. You've got to make them think about something. And that seems to me very true. I have a small group here in Rhode Island that they'll be meeting on Friday, but it ends up, it doesn't have, I'm going to try to introduce into it a subject each week so people think about it. You need something to propel thought in a particular direction. If I have to write a book, or if I have to write an article, I start thinking about it, which I would not otherwise. But I do agree with you. There seems to be a lack of curiosity generally, and it may be because we have, because of the cell phone, a sense of surfeit of knowledge. And because it can all be got in 1 second, the answer to every question is on the computer or on the cell phone, but that has to pass. The fundamental things that drive human beings don't go away because of a technology. They're still present. We still want to have fun. We still want to do well. We're still interested in sex, except Johnny. These are the driving forces that are constant. How you direct them is how you get a prosperous society. It would seem to me the purpose of an organized society is to bring safety, security to all of its people. I'm not sure we're doing that at the moment. While we can get awfully enthused by what Elon Musk is doing in Texas, people on fixed incomes facing inflation are less enthused. And Johnny made a very good point that without trade unions, you've got to have some other device to drive incomes. I was once president of the Washington Baltimore Newspaper Guild, and we got some of the highest salary settlements on newspapers, which are notoriously poorly paid, because we had the power to do it with the threat of strike. And in fact, I struck some papers. I struck the Baltimore Sun. But these, without incentives, nothing happens. And incentives can be very detrimental to some people and very beneficial to others. And that's just the nature of the human condition.
I agree 100%.
Jorge,
Yeah.
Jorge, I wanna jump real quick because I'm looking at the time and I want to drive some of your answers or your comments to certain things. So what's your take as we are going through this digitalization journey of infrastructure, houses, buildings, roads, how we move, how we live, where buildings are becoming power plants with solar panels and energy storage, and vehicles are becoming power plants that can sell energy back to the grid. So do the houses, the buildings. The constructs are changing. Users are becoming producers. The digital connectivity is allowing control and movement of data and information, and opportunities are being created everywhere. And I would argue that right now, while Johnny continues to say that we need more entrepreneurs, there are more entrepreneurs today at this moment than the history of all the other years combined, because of how the democratization of technology and innovation keeps touching everybody more and more and more and more. And my question is, how do we replicate what we have built? We have a formula in society, sort of, kind of, engineering, cities, how they function. Elon Musk talks about being a multiplanetary species, and let's go build this thing in Mars or the moon or somewhere else. How hard is that to do? How hard is it to do what we have built over the last 2,000 years?
It's hard if you try to fix what we have in place. It's not hard when you look at it from a different perspective. So it's funny what you just said. I'm going to combine it with Llewellyn's comment. I'll tell you what the incentives that I have found that drive me and that I'm trying to communicate. I have been looking for things that unite people, and I have yet to find people that say, I don't want quality of life. I don't want quality of place, whether it's natural, built, or virtual. I don't want to be able to do anything I want. A human endeavor, I don't care. I don't want any verbs enabled by whatever it is. So for me, the biggest incentives of what I'm trying to not sell, but unleash through the agency of communities that have never had a chance to build a capacity to do it on their own and are always waiting I'm from the university, I'm here to help, I'm from the county, I'm from the state, I'm from the federal government. I don't believe in any of that. So the first incentive is understanding that quality of life, place, and human endeavor are what we want to do. But the second thing is, another incentive is the whole world that now does not look at sustainability as anything good because it's green, woke, whatever. I'll tell you what, I learned from the military in the 90s that sustainability, they were one of the first ones that embraced that concept, was about sustaining the mission. So if you look at sustainability not as a green, woke element, but sustain with a capital A, ability, it's the ability to sustain. And here's the incentives, Llewellyn. Do we want livability? Yes, we need to sustain it. Do we need resilience? Yes, because we don't know when a cyclone is going to go by, a hurricane goes by, or an earthquake goes by. The third thing that we want to also protect there is a whole idea of prosperity. It is one of my integral protective layers. That's an incentive. Another incentive is, hey, we're humans. Let's be intelligent about that. If you have a Fitbit and all it collects is data and you don't change your thing, it's not about getting smart cities. It's smart and cognitive cities and everything else that's smart. And the last one is the fact that you cannot do anything without facilities and infrastructure. And that brings me back to my roots of architecture, engineering, and construction. Everything you need today, from a data center to the tallest building in the world, will require that special training. But you see, architects, engineers, and constructors are never in the front pages because of what they do. Sometimes it's just forgotten, but you can see the building, you can see the data center, you can see the road. So that's kind of bringing both of them together. So I'm going to leave you with 5 little pillars to be explained later. But if you want me to share how we're actually approaching this, the knowledge loop is the number one pillar, because now with AI and several other things, we have knowledge that we have not been able to tap before. But knowledge we produce and we use. The second thing is what Llewellyn opened the door about why it had failed. We need a different kind of industrial, ecosystem. It's not just about standardized families. When you start looking at modular in other elements, like cars or how they do them, you need to start borrowing those industrial ecosystems and have that cross fertilization. The third one goes back to the concept of the ecosystem. The infrastructure that we need has to be living, monitoring, adapting, moving along, expanding, serving everyone. Then another element, that's number 4, is the whole idea of regeneration. We need to have that sustainable, resilient, and health-promoting living environments. We don't need more hospitals if we had a good kind of living. There's a project that is called Health and Nature, in which nature can be a therapist and nature can be a doctor. I had my doctor give me a prescription for that. And yes, we need that close thing. And the last one, I think that is going to resonate with all of you, and that is the financial intelligence layer. Okay? Without that, insurance, sureties, bonds, all kinds of things, the return on investment, the $1 trillion, open call for give me money. So the point is that, yeah, there are a lot of these things. My problem and my challenge is I'm going to die pursuing all of these. And I'm trying to plant the seeds in multiple circles. And that is why I'm committed to the cause. And I want to thank you all for the opportunity to share my crazy thoughts.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that I see the journey of what's happening in an incredible time. And Jorge, I look forward to our work at Project Austin, and this audience will learn more about it. I'm super excited about what's going on with the recent relationships and conversations with Oak Ridge National Lab, the Argonne National Lab, ARPA-E, and many other things that are happening. And I think that in the end, this purposely driven design philosophies, methodologies, best practices on how we do better, improve how we're doing as society, as a human race. It's really the labor is the craftsmanship of a lifetime for everybody. And they'll play a role in it one way or another as an investor. I always tell people talk about the chicken and the egg. The entrepreneur needs money to get going, but then the guy who wants to buy the product needs to see the product built first. But you can't build the product until you have a customer. And this chicken and egg really requires one thing, and maybe you can call it God, but if there is no investor, if nobody writes a check for you to build the thing that you can build to sell to somebody who doesn't know that they even want it, then nothing happens, right? And so there comes capitalism and Johnny's work at Austin, in the beautiful thing it's happening in Austin. And Hewlett Packard just agreed to move to Houston, Texas. And the movement from all places to Texas is happening at an incredible pace. And I can only foresee an incredible future where the design that you're talking about, purposely driven, generates a world that is 10 times better than what we have.
Yep. Amen.
So, final thoughts, Llewellyn, closing thoughts?
Well, I have a lot of thoughts, as you know. I think that that you've got to reduce these ideas to very practical things that ordinary people understand. I also think you want to be careful of not to over-design the future. It doesn't allow for the crazy thing that comes along and swamps everything. Otherwise, you're constantly trying to build to breed a faster horse, not to build an automobile. And most of the great creations that have changed the way we live have been contrary to orthodoxy. And if you have too much plan, you get orthodoxy, and orthodoxy is restricting, not creative. So, and I also would like to make a case for entrepreneurs, as one myself, that entrepreneurs do not necessarily have to be in Austin and do not necessarily have to have anything to do with the electromagnetic world. The couples starting a coffee shop are just as much entrepreneurs and go through many of the same struggles, but only in microcosm. And they might not be advised to start it in Austin.
Absolutely. Closing thoughts, Johnny?
Well, I agreed with Llewellyn until the envy of Austin sneaked into his wonderful comments.
Remember, Johnny, I was coming to Austin before you moved. I got it ready for you.
Well, it was a much
you to lie in.
Yeah, but no. When Llewellyn is talking about serendipity, we know that lots of inventions and great companies were a result of serendipity, including polio.
You better before this Texas miracle, this halcyon place that is evolving, you better do something about water. And so,
well, once we get out of
no entrepreneur has come up with a way of making new potable water.
Well, once the Republic of Texas has succeeded from the Union, we'll figure that one out. But right now, we got to put up some other stuff.
Many of us hope that blessed event happens soon.
Okay. But no,
I think it's always a pleasure, Jorge.
Thank you,
Andres. We'll have you back. We'll have you back.
Thank you, John.
Johnny, take us away.
Bring us your tired and weak, and we will make them strong. Bring us your foreign songs, and we will sing along. Bring us your broken dreams, we give them time to mend. There's still a lot of love living in the promised land, living in the promised land. Our dreams are made of steel. The prayer of everyone is to know how freedom feels. There is a wonderful time in the promised land. Woo! Okay. Llewellyn, I'm working on our mail problem, Llewellyn. Okay, take care. Nice seeing you, Jorge. Take care.
Thank you, Jorge.
Bye-bye.
Bye. See you in 25 minutes. Andres, see you in 25.
Absolutely.
All right. Bye.
Bye.